don't just list the jobs and don't just list your responsibilities, but put the impact. I worked on this project, raised, ROI 200%. Have those impact statements out there because the great recruiters are going to look for impact first. And they're going to say, these are the needles I need to move. And I need people who have proven history of moving those needles first and foremost. If you can mash the profile to those needs, it makes life a lot easier for everyone.
Hey everyone, I'm Debbie Madden, the host of the Scaling Tech podcast, and I couldn't be happier to talk to Kevin today, a longtime friend. So Kevin Lupowitz, welcome to Scaling Tech. It's great to have you.
Oh, it's great to be here. I'm very excited.
So we're talking about, I think, a very important topic to many tech leaders that I talk with, which is how to enter an industry as a tech leader when you're not a domain expert. So many CTOs, VPs of engineer are looking for adjacent opportunities right now because of the market conditions, right? So this is such an important topic. And Kevin, I've known personally for over a decade. He has done this himself. And so I'm really excited to hear what you have to share. So before we jump into the questions, for those that don't know Kevin, he's a tech leader that has done many things. He has been a leader on multiple organizations over 20 years. Many firms have been in the field of financial technology, but not all of them. They've often varied in the services offered, the client persona, and the metrics for success. So these are all different things where you might bring adjacent skill sets, which is why it's important. Most recently, Kevin was the head of tech and co-lead of engineering at Paxos, which many of us have heard of before. They're a blockchain-based infrastructure company. Prior, he was an early innovator in fintech technology, being one of the founding employees and heads of tech at Liquidnet. Also, many of you guys know Clear. Kevin he stepped out of fintech. This is really important to our conversation, to become an early CIO for Clear, which is like adjacent-ish. And so many of us know Clear from airports and biometrics and the like. So with all of this personal experience, I really kind of want to start with this, walk us through your transition into Clear, right? Because you were CIO there for how many years? For 5 years?
5 years, yeah.
But first you had to get the job.
Right.
Start, tell us about that.
Yeah, that was interesting. So I was introduced to Clear, specifically the CEO of Clear, Karen Simon Becker, through a mutual acquaintance. And she had just bought the company out of bankruptcy and was looking, effectively had a bunch of kiosks and had a name and some clients, but there was no technology stack to really run it. And, Karen had come from the hedge fund world. So she was somewhat in financial services. And so she knew Liquidnet. So I had a little bit of pedigree kind of going in.
Okay, that's one recipe for success. Talk to someone that kind of has a shared experience.
Yeah, exactly. Even if it's just a little bit overlapping.
Okay.
But then we talked, and really, we met for coffee. And I remember we were supposed to meet for 20 minutes of coffee to get to know each other, and it turned into a 4-hour conversation. And really, it really quickly got into, what are the success criteria? What is it that they're looking to build at Clear? And what does success look like from a technology stack? And things like, obviously, reliability and scalability and all the ilities that are so important across the board are critically important. But, I made it very clear. I didn't know anything about biometrics, and that's a key piece of their puzzle. I didn't know, and I had never worked in retail. So, my background was in institutional clients. So we had, hundreds of clients, not millions of clients or hundreds of millions of clients. And so I was very honest with her and said, this is really not where my expertise is. And, I was lucky enough that she said, well, really what I need is someone to come in and help build that platform, build the team, build the platform. And so she was very focused on that skill set. And so we agreed to try it out for a year, and I thought I'd, kind of do it for a year. And then, as you mentioned, I ended up being there for 5 years because it really turned into a great company and a really fun kind of continually growing set of solutions.
And you had told me earlier also that you turned your lack of domain expertise into an advantage. So how'd you do that?
So yeah. I didn't put a lot of forethought into it, but obviously in a real time mode, she was talking about all of the other technologists that were kind of interviewing for this role, and they came from either the travel industry or they came from the biometric industry, or they came from the kind of security, kind of TSA, Homeland Security world. But none of them had built large scale enterprise, architecture applications. And so really, the message was, well, you could bring in one of those people, but you're going to get something that looks the same as anyone else has ever done. There's not going to be any differentiation. And so the positive that I kind of threw into the mix was I'd be coming at it with no preconceived notions of, what biometric system is the best. I'm going to go in with a blank slate and pick the best solution for what the needs of the organization are, not based on, my network in biometrics. I'm not going to use my network in security systems to pick, my favorite vendors there. And so effectively coming in and saying, bringing in someone outside who comes in with a clean slate and has no preconceived notions can actually be a benefit and gives you an advantage. And she bought it. Yeah.
Karen, if you're listening.
Yeah.
One thing you didn't say, but I picked up on that's happened to me before, is sometimes when you are making this transition, it's helpful not to be the first person the hiring manager talks to. Because you had said all the other people she spoke to had this and didn't have this, but that implies that she spoke with other people first. And I found that in my experience too, when I'm going for something where I say to myself, I have no business getting this thing, it is helpful to not be the first one.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think I was lucky. I didn't plan it that way. And actually I think she was pretty far along with a couple of other candidates. And I think it was just refreshing to hear a very different point of view. And then again, really what I focused on, and just to circle back to the point you made earlier, is those kind of adjacent skill sets and going in and saying, let me tell you about projects that also had to scale, that also had to be extremely reliable, 24/7 uptime,
right.
5 nines, all of that. And really that's what she grasped onto because, and she knew that she was going to have one chance. It was a very, working with Homeland Security and TSA, you can't go back to the well multiple times. You really need to, knock the cover off the ball right off the bat. And that really resonated with her. And so when I told her about, moving from equities into fixed income and moving from fixed income into options trading, I explained, there's always a domain expertise to learn, but those core skills on delivering those world-class solutions are critical. And if you bring that to the table, those are things that I can learn, anyone could learn, and then apply them. Those core skills are, have to be baked in. They come with experience, they come with seasoning, and it's really hard to back into those.
Yeah, I really like that. Okay, so I think we can all say that it was a resounding success because Clear is, known globally now, thanks in part to the work that you did for 5 years because you joined at an inflection point. Like you said, the technology existed and a bunch of kiosks, and then, there was a lot of faith and elbow grease put in. So, you and Karen were onto something here. So on the flip side of that, though, once you got the job and started working, I'm sure you learned a bunch of stuff. So what were your top surprises or your top challenges once you kind of dug in and started down that path?
Well, I mean, you just think about the timing. This is kind of 2000, 2012 when I joined. So, it was the early days of cloud computing, and, we had to, and I hadn't had any experience in cloud computing before. Everything was data center uh, based. And we knew that if we were going to deliver solutions that needed to, register in New York, but also verify in Los Angeles, but be able to do that in sub-second. And these are the kind of criteria we needed to have a very distributed system. And so, um, you know, that was when I started working with, Amazon, and, because we're also under Homeland Security, um, they had a region called GovCloud. So, there was a lot of learnings on the job. I had to learn cloud computing. I had to learn, FedRAMP based cloud computing. I had to work with AWS and have them take that one region and effectively make it FedRAMP across multiple regions. So it very quickly pivoted from not just delivering this technology stack and learning this domain expertise, but it's really kind of being open-minded and saying, okay, there's a lot of other core capabilities that need to exist here to deliver this. And how do we get that done? And then, it's the build versus buy discussions. And so all of that was, the first couple of years of the engagement. Although we launched our cardless solution within a year, which was really quick for that time.
It's interesting to me that your answer to the question at the end, you said, "Oh, that was the first couple of years," right? And I think that's an important thing not to skip over, because when you are hired in a senior technology position, especially in an adjacent position, there's a lot to do, and you have to consider time in the equation, right? It's not that the person that hired you expect you to figure it all out in the first quarter or even the first year, right? It's just, okay, and that took 2 years, right? And so you have to be comfortable with yourself knowing that you'll get there, which I think is hard.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. And I think it's really important that expectations are set early on. And I think, one of the other key recipes, if you're going in without the domain expertise, kind of getting back to the topic, if you're going in without the domain expertise, there's always, there's a trust factor. Is this person going to be able to deliver? And so maintaining that trust, and even if it's a multi-year project, being able to chunk it down and keep the communication channels open, have near-term milestones, be able to deliver on those near-term milestones, don't operate in a vacuum. And it's really about continuously building trust and maintaining trust. Because until you deliver that big bang that you were hired for, there's always going to be that, did I make a mistake bringing this person in? Which makes everyone's job harder.
From the outside looking in, I think there's this false assumption that once you reach the CTO seat, like imposter syndrome goes away. But did you have any?
Oh, all the time.
Really?
All the time. I mean, the beauty is, one of Karen's favorite terms was "fake it till you make it," because she wasn't in the travel industry before. She was, ran a hedge fund.
Yeah.
And she was the CEO of this organization. To her credit, she went into, these meetings with, top Pentagon and TSA officials and Homeland Security officials, and had to act like she is an expert in the field. And so I would say we had collectively imposter syndrome early days until we kind of got over that hump.
Yeah, and I know Karen, and I believe in her ability to achieve her goals. So I can imagine what that must have been like. Switching gears a little bit, so the labor market right now is probably not at its hardest, but probably not at its easiest. So, and it will probably continue to be more challenging than historical for a little while, especially for senior tech folks that are looking to make a change. So, like, these lessons learned, do you think anything changes today, given that things might have been, I don't know categorically that they're harder than they were in 2011, but they might be? Anything change, or is same approach, do you think?
I think it's the same. The one thing I would encourage people to do is, if they're looking for new opportunities, be more open-minded. I mean, it's okay to look for opportunities outside of your kind of historical domain that you've been operating in. And I think a lot of people kind of stay, in bounds of what they've always been doing. And I think that, I have always found, getting involved in something that I hadn't been in before is intellectually stimulating. It does bring a little more flavor to it, so. And I think a lot of people are nervous about potentially switching into a different, domain, even if it's a micro domain or a major shift into a completely different domain. I would say be open-minded to that, and take your skills, do a good inventory of what you've brought to the table before, and bring those to the table for these opportunities. And I think people will be surprised how. I think there is a shift in being open-minded and saying, okay, these are the skill sets we need. They could learn the domain over time.
And in an interesting way, where everyone in tech right now is doing this, whether we know it or not, because we're all learning generative AI. So we're
Well,
all learning, like all of us are doing this, right? Whether we like it or not, whether we want to or not, right? I think it's a kind of a nice kind of equal footing for everyone to be like, okay, everyone's kind of new at this one thing. So the people that are kind of, lifelong learners can kind of say, oh, I can then learn a different thing if I can learn this, right? And so it is kind of a nice, if you look at it that way, a nice kind of even footing for us all. I want to kind of wrap up this conversation with those on the hiring side, whether they be the CEO or the founder or the recruiters or a board, right? Because if you're a CTO, you're probably talking to all three of those types of
yep.
folks, right? So on the vetting side, the hiring side, how can those folks find those folks that are transitioning, like yourself, like others, who maybe don't have the specific domain skills? I mean, computers might weed out resumes erroneously at the start. Human beings might not know what to look for. So what kind of tips and advice do you have for those folks?
Well, I think these tips go on both sides, and I can tell you, Paxos had a great recruiting team, and they were really good at finding people that were outside, of the kind of domain and bringing in great talent. And really, what they looked for is impact, and so one of the things I would encourage everyone to do as you're kind of building your resumes, as you're looking at your LinkedIn profiles, don't just list the jobs and don't just list your responsibilities, but put the impact. I worked on this project and it, raised, ROI 200% or whatever it is, have those impact statements out there, because the great recruiters and the great hiring managers are going to look for impact first. And they're going to say, these are the needles I need to move. And I need people who have proven history of moving those needles first and foremost. And if you can mash the profile to those needs, it makes life a lot easier for everyone.
Right. And then I would probably say there's some sort of dot connecting that as the applicant you can do, where you kind of say, this is why this impact is going to be valuable to you. Take a moment, send an email, right? Like, I feel like those are the stories that you could start to tell, so that, and then, on the recruiting side, on the hiring side, they can ask, oh, tell me why this impact is going to be valuable here. And so that, if you can really kind of hone in on that conversation, then that's how we find on both sides the right fit, right?
Absolutely. The reverse is true. As a hiring manager, being able to dig in and say, here is an opportunity for you to really provide some incredible impact based on your experience. And we need that here.
Yeah.
That's how you're going to attract those great individuals.
Right. Absolutely. I love it. Well, sadly, we're at time, but I really appreciate you sharing your story. I think it's super relevant to many, many people out there today. So thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. And thank you, Kevin. And have
Thank you,
a great day,
Debbie.
everyone.
See ya.